going to continue talking to reporters with lots of experience covering the Capitol. So Sherry from the Denver Post and David Lightman from the McClatchy Washington Bureau, obviously both regionals, and they're going to talk about a variety of things. I think they will cover, talk a little bit more about working with lobbyists and reporting for the states, how to sort of tell those Washington stories in ways that can be relevant for audiences outside of Washington, and frankly, whatever else they want to talk about, because they've both got experience and anecdotes and lots to share.
And way more than me.
And I'll
older.
And I'll make a personal plea to just talk for a minute about this idea. I mean, everybody knows this, right? That of 1,000 bills that are written and introduced, 2 or 3 or 5 ever make it into law, and how, if it's possible at an early stage, to sort of do the triage and figure out what's DOA and what actually has a chance, so that you can spend your reporting resources a little more fully. So that said, David and Allison, who wants to?
Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Get it over with.
No. No, you guys are all really talented, so I'm not really sure, to be honest. I feel like I don't have a lot to teach you all, because I read who you are.
That's why I want you to go first.
That's why I wanted you to go first. I was a Paul Miller Fellow, and I met Karen, the girl who was here before, and she's one of my closest girlfriends in D.C. from this fellowship group, so this is a very valuable experience for you guys. I hope you guys are getting as much out of it as I did. So I guess I just, there's people who sort of write for DC audiences, and then there are people in DC who write for the regular public. And this presentation is sort of about people who write for the masses. And it's not necessarily like regional specific, because there are people who write, TV stations and wire services who are writing for national, like sort of the lay audience that isn't just like a regional audience, but it's like, like more like you, where you're writing for several states. But it's like, people who are in the Beltway and people who are outside of the Beltway is kind of, but we're writing for sort of the lay people. And I guess I walked in at the last 15 or 20 minutes of this session when you guys were talking about motion to recommit and stuff, and I'm so glad she touched on that, because I don't usually pay attention to that kind of stuff, because A, I don't have to cover the majority leader. Thank God no one from Colorado is that powerful. And that also that I think it's more interesting to people to, obviously you have to kind of follow that in your own head, but to try to sort of cut through that crap and not have to follow it, breath by breath, and sort of say, what does this really mean to people? What does this government shutdown mean to people? What does the sort of defense spending bill mean for people? And that's where I feel like we have to do our jobs, because anyone can like get on the website and read sort of what's happening, or get on C-SPAN and read what's happening, on the floor or whatever. But it's like we have to do our jobs by saying, what does this really mean for this person in Wisconsin, this person in Texas, the entire state of California, the whole. I mean, it's kind of the cutting through the fog stuff. And I found, so that's all I'm going to say. That's my entry.
Okay.
I've got more things, but I'll let you talk.
Okay, let me follow along that line and talk about connecting with readers outside of Washington. I was a regional reporter for a long time. I headed the Hartford Courant's Washington Bureau, and now last several years more national focus with McClatchy. And a couple things I always found, obviously the most important is remember the reader. Just like the lawmakers, you can get caught in this bubble in Washington. It's very easy to do. When's the House going to vote next? When's the Senate going to vote? Do they have the votes? Most people don't give a darn. I mean, you got to cover this stuff, but you also have to remember that the people in Denver or Hartford or wherever, all they care about is what it means to them. And it's tough because you're in that bubble. There's 100 other reporters. Your natural instincts are to be competitive with those reporters. And you don't want to be the one sitting there on your laptop writing a feature about Senator Bennett when 100 reporters are all going for a story that's going to crack 50 front pages the next day. You got to get over that, okay, for a lot of reasons. I mean, as somebody who's probably had, literally 5,000 front page bylines in my life, honestly. And the only reason I know that, when I left Hartford, they had a thing where I had 3,500 front page bylines. So, anyway, I don't need another one, okay? I'm not quitting my job tomorrow, but the point is, I'd rather do good stuff, okay? It's kind of like feeding the web. So remember the reader, remember the good story there, number one. Number two, be very, very careful about talking and writing like you're part of the Capitol. I used to say when I was a bureau chief to our people, I said, if I ever catch you saying to a senator or at a press conference, what time are we voting? What time are we leaving? Ugh. You're not we, okay? They're them and you're you. You work for us, not the U.S. Senate. And there's that tendency to be part of it. And then you start talking like that. Does anybody in the Denver, how many people in the Denver metro area know what a conference committee is, right? Or care? It's a negotiating committee, okay? Keep away from that jargon. Third is figure out a strategy just to divorce your brain from the process. Okay, what I mean is that there are going to be days you spend 15 hours inside that bubble. Don't spend 15 hours inside that bubble. Go out for an hour. In the old days, we'd say have a cigarette. Now I would have an ice cream cone or something. But whatever you do, but divorce, just don't do anything illegal, obviously. But get out of there. Okay, sit on a bench, eat your lunch in the park.
Call your mom.
You call your mother,
because
right?
she
Whatever.
probably would be like, she's a good perspective, right? You know, she
Right.
know what motion to recommit means? No.
No, and by divorcing yourself from I don't mean sit there at your computer and check the baseball scores for 5 minutes. No, get out of there. Clear your brain. The first 2.5 years I worked here, I had been working in Baltimore before this, and I continued to live in Baltimore. And it was funny, every day you cross a certain line somewhere in Laurel or Howard County, and instead of the Appropriations Committee doesn't know if it can finish its work today, you cross over into, 3 people were shot at a row house in East Baltimore. But the point is reality took over, and you've got to somehow divorce yourself from that. And finally, and this all goes to what y'all were looking at this morning, unfortunately you do have to know the process. You have to know a motion to recommit means, you have to know what vote's important. You have to know what bill introductions are important. There's no primer I or anyone else can give you, I hate to say. I mean, the way I learned was partly just sitting there like a sponge, partly older reporters, not being afraid to ask what seemed like dumb questions of older reporters. Take advantage of people like me. You're not an older reporter. They can take advantage. Yeah, you've been around.
I really haven't.
But you know what I'm saying. Don't be afraid to ask, okay?
I actually ask the Senate offices too.
Yeah.
Like don't be afraid to ask dumb questions of just like the press guy in my senator's office, who's a pretty nice person. It's like he's not going to laugh at me if I'm like, what does it mean? I mean, I don't have to ask this anymore, but I did when I got here. I was like, what does it mean to motion to recommit, and why is that? And they'll just tell you, and it's okay. Like they're not expecting you to know when you get,
And if people snicker at you or give you funny looks, the heck with them. Okay? Because most of us have been where you were, or where you are. Okay? We're not going to make fun of you. Ask us. Okay? And finally, the Capitol is really an intoxicating place. It's arguably, I think, the best place to cover in Washington. Because you have access to everybody. And it's the only place in this town where you get both sides of every issue. Think about it. You can't wander the Pentagon and talk to people. And you can't wander the White or any place anymore. You can wander the Capitol, get all sides, all ideologies. But again, as intoxicating as that is, remember who you're writing for. And you're not writing for Orrin Hatch and Michael Bennett and that. You're writing for those readers back home.
So I hope this is kind of a conversation. So please, you guys jump in, because honestly, I think that's more interesting anyway than hearing us sitting here talking.
There are no dumb questions.
And comments. I mean, I just would like to hear from you guys on what your what you sort of have challenges with, and if you have a hard time connecting. Do you guys have a hard time connecting with regular audiences? I mean, are you having a hard time sort of cutting through the fog or the translation in what you do here to your audiences?
Hi, I'm Michael Lindenberg from the Dallas paper.
Oh yeah.
Like a story or two that you think has been especially successful that you've done that has either cut across the grain or taken the story today but done it in a way that has connected with your readers in a way. Like what are the what are your goals? What are the stories that you're trying to replicate or match or beat or that you've done?
It's a really good question. Are you guys totally sick of talking about the government shutdown? I could give another example. So I did a kind of a political profile of I cover 9 people, 4 Republicans and 5 Democrats, which is cool. Having a 5-4 split always means that I get to talk to way different people. And I have 2 Republicans who are on the House Armed Services Committee. One is real traditional, kind of a old school, loves defense spending, is a Tea Partier, but loves spending money on defense. And government contractors. His district is hugely military. He's got the Air Force Academy, U.S. Northern Command, and Fort Carson, which has got 30,000 troops stationed there at any given time, all in one district. So it's like and so that always spawns defense contractors who are all there too. So his district is hugely military focused. So he's on the House Armed Services Committee. He loves defense spending. He gets a lot of money from Lockheed Martin, as you can imagine, for his re-election campaigns and Northrop Grumman and stuff like that. So he's in that. He loves spending. I've got another Republican who's actually a Marine combat veteran and was in Iraq, and he is also on the House Armed Services Committee, and he's this huge advocate for defense spending cuts. And he's kind of a lone Republican on this. I mean, there's not that many Republicans who love defense spending cuts, and this guy has the street credibility to love it because he was actually there. He was in Iraq fighting, and he saw flab, and he saw inconsistent, ways of spending money. And so I wrote a story, there's sort of 2 lines of thought on defense spending. And because they're both Republicans and they're both on this committee, I sort of wrote a story about defense spending overall and how much it is, and the sort of 2 philosophies or competing philosophies on the House Armed Services Committee on spending, and I used through the eyes of these 2 people who are local Colorado guys, and I went all the way down to the district and talked to people in their districts and their respective districts, and the economic growth. I mean, for you guys, and even the people who work for sort of like NBC News or whatever, you guys really need to be sourced in chambers of Congresses. Like governor's offices around the country. I mean, those guys have amazing amounts of data. They have like data about the state, they have economic growth, they have economic depression, I call the chamber, and they tend to be less political than everything here. So if you call a governor's office, there's some more political governors in this country than others. We know. Your governor is maybe a little different. Most governors, I would say, 40 out of the 50 governors are a lot less political than anything here. And you can call them and you can just get data. I mean, of course, there's politics in there, but it's like they'll have how much, for example, the defense industry in Colorado, contributes to the state economy or the state GDP. They have all of that stuff. So those are really good pieces of data to have, even if you're writing for a sort of a national audience. If you had like 4 governor's offices who their person, and you can just call and throw in a few interesting states and state data for something like the government shutdown or the defense spending bill, I think those are really valuable. And I love those people. I mean, because they actually respond. They're, like I said, they're like slightly less political, at least, in the state that I cover. But I think most states really, they're slightly less political than if I call one of the members on the Hill, and they just have lots of really interesting data about the people who live in these places. So I love that.
Let me second that. There are a couple of good places to go. You probably know them. The National Governors Association is a gold mine. Federal funds information for states. Every subgroup has a nonpartisan interest group. AASHTO is the highway group. There's I can't remember the name, the higher education, Association of Secondary School Administrators or something. A guy named Haley Chitty, who's very good. But they all have the data, and they love to talk to you. Transportation, same thing. They're all, nonpartisan. They just want the money. And so they're happy to help you. As far as local goes, what I found most effective, aside from the investigative, bigger picture, first of all, you work with the reporters back home. Now, I know that there's often tension between the local reporters and the Washington reporters, and this is where you and your personality can help. I know when I worked in Baltimore as a local reporter, the Washington people were exalted. You didn't call them. They were, we try very hard not to promote that image. You know, call us. We're just like you, just, you know, a few years older or more experienced or lucky or whatever. But break down that barrier. You know, go, I'm sure you've done this, go visit the Dallas newsroom or the whatever, Minneapolis newsroom, make yourself known. Let them know, look, I'm not trying to steal your thunder. And I know in Connecticut, we work that very well. So if low-income energy assistance, which is an annual fight, was on the blocks, I could call somebody and say, hey, I got the Washington piece, can you find 5 families that are gonna be left out in the cold here? That kind of thing, we combine it like that. Or I'd even go up there sometimes, if they were cutting whatever, the interior budget. I remember once going to a park in Waterbury, Connecticut that was gonna be closed, just, you know, story writes itself. So there's small things you can do. The second thing, one of the great advantages to being a regional these days is that there aren't a lot of regionals. And I still maintain these delegations are where you get your best stories. I mean, let's be honest here. Reed, Pelosi, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they ain't gonna leak a lot of stuff to me, okay? They're gonna leak it to, frankly, certain bigger papers and organizations. But I cultivate relationships with the people in the Carolinas, Texas, that kind of thing, places where we're strong, Miami, because they're gonna talk to us. And they know the same things, frankly, that the Boehners and Pelosi's and the Reeds of the world know. You'd be amazed how many stories you can break. Not to prolong this, but 20 years ago, when Clinton was trying to pick his cabinet, and there were reporters down in Little Rock waiting, you know, and sitting in the hotel, and I get a call from somebody from Connecticut saying, I know who the next Attorney General is going to be. And they were right. And I wrote the story because there was somebody from Connecticut. You can do the same thing, and it's not that difficult. Anyway, let me stop it. Questions, comments?
What other DC speak do you hear like way too often instead of like real person talk, like jargon?
My pet peeve is that there's too much emphasis and talk about the process. That drives me crazy. You know, all these show votes the House is doing right now. Just who cares, right? Or the 43 votes against whatever. There's too much journalistic attention being paid to this junk. I mean, we do have to pay attention, but you don't have to write it. I guess it was a couple Saturdays ago, we were all there till 12:30 in the morning. And we had to stay because they were voting out all this stuff. We're thinking, this is ridiculous. I mean, we're spending hours and hours and hours just waiting just to make sure that something doesn't happen. I mean, we did other things in the meantime. But, and not to knock my peers, but there are far too many stories that night, including ours probably. You know, the House voted after midnight to do X. Couldn't that manpower have been better used? So that's too much process. Take a look at the transcript of a Reed or McConnell press conference on Tuesdays. You know, they have their luncheons. I don't know if Karan can talk to you about this. They'll have their luncheons on Tuesdays. Then they come out. Take a look at those transcripts. It's 80% process. When are you going to vote? Do you have the votes? That's what you have press secretaries for.
I don't cover bill introductions as a rule, just because I try to be consistent on. I just 90 whatever percent. I don't actually know the actual percentage, but most of them don't go anywhere. So I don't really cover that, because if I covered one, then I'd feel like it was unfair if I wasn't covering the other 8 people who are introducing bills. If there's some news, I mean, obviously there's no real rules in journalism. If our Tea Party member introduced a bill on legalizing gay marriage, I would write about that. That would be fascinating. He won't. But I just, you know, that's as a rule, I don't really write about that. I think those are overwritten about sometimes in regional papers.
I think my overarching rule has always been Washington, Baltimore, wherever I work, is avoid lazy journalism. You know, we always tell people Washington's both the easiest and hardest town to cover. You know, easy because you can make a living doing nothing but covering floor debates and, you know, committee hearing is the easiest thing in the world, right? You go, you get a reserved seat, the testimony's in front of you, they're out by lunch, boom, right? But the real stories are much harder actually in this town, because you know, to get to somebody, you gotta go through layers of people and bureaucracy and all that. But you want to try to avoid things that brand you as a lazy journalist. somebody else had their hand up?
I did.
Sorry.
You kind of answered it. But so in the event that you were covering a specific bill being introduced that affected your readers, how would you determine whether or not it actually has a shot at being passed?
I mean, I don't cover the bill introductions. If it passes out of committee, I would maybe start to monitor it if it went to the full House or the full floor. If it passes both chambers and gets signed by the president, I usually put a blog post up. I mean, that's usually what I wait for. And I didn't do that when I first got here. I was doing more of the chasing around the tail of something that always died. But now I'm just like, there's just other stuff to pay attention to. You know, there's more interesting sort of value-added journalism than the bill introductions. I got some crap from one of our members about a week and a half ago because he was the lead sponsor on the Pay Our Military Act, which ended up, you know, whizzing through the House and the Senate and to the president's desk and signed within 36 hours. I mean, I covered it, but I didn't cover it right when he introduced it because it was sort of in the early fog of the government shutdown, and we didn't know. I didn't know if the president would sign something like that because he was so pissed that the government shut down. And I didn't know if he was like, I'm not going to just pay the military. But then it turns out, obviously, that no one is going to vote against paying the troops and getting them to work during a government shutdown. So it was like passed unanimously in the House, and then I was like a little bit catching up, and I got some heat from my friend/source at the NRCC, and he's like, this is a really big deal, and I can't believe you didn't write about this bill introduction, blah, 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 and he's like, he gave me like a line of, like, it was like at 2 a.m, and he was really mad, or maybe he had been drinking, I'm not sure, but, so I felt a little bad that I didn't sort of have the foresight that was going to be such a big deal, and it ended up being kind of a national story, and it was one of my guys who introduced it, was the lead sponsor on it. Actually, the guy I was talking about earlier who was a Marine combat veteran. So sometimes that philosophy, you know, I mean, I covered it, but it was like I was maybe 12 hours too late in posting it up to our website, and I felt a little bad about that. There's no rules,
Yeah.
but that was kind of important.
There's
I
two
didn't know.
values to bill introductions. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Best advice was some of the best advice I got a million years ago when I was heading to Annapolis, this was like in the 70s, and they said, same thing, we don't want you writing bill introductions, we don't want you doing cheap stories, but behind every bill introduction is an issue. There's a reason it's introduced. That's your story. Find the genesis of this thing. And I'll tell you, that has led me to more terrific stories over the years. I mean, the bill introduction may be the 19th paragraph, but why is it being introduced? Number one. Number two, bill introductions, follow the money. Who are you rewarding with this? I mean, I'm not saying there's a quid pro quo, and you can't say that in your stories, but you know and I know this stuff doesn't come out of thin air. And if you want to go even further,
Actually, I have a good example of that.
you don't see it so much anymore, where lobbyists actually write the bills.
Mm-hmm.
That happens. Now, it's hard to track down because it's hard to get the original. It used to be go into a file and the original documents were there, like a letter or something, or a memo. In this electronic age, it's harder to do. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, actually, there was a front page story I read about a bill introduction, so obviously there's no rules. Because one of our House members who lives in the eastern plains of Colorado, very, very, very far from Alaska, very far, introduced a bill about drilling in this one little inlet in Alaska. And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? And so then I followed the money up, and he ended up getting all this money from this little group, this oil company that's invested right in this inlet in Alaska, and they donated this much money, and then it kind of like, I wrote this whole story, which he probably didn't really like that much. I mean, I don't know, I don't think his district really cares that he gets oil money from Alaska, but it ended up being kind of a story about that and a little bit about the process, but explaining it to lay people that this sometimes does happen. You know, you do get money from someone, and then you directly introduce a bill that will directly benefit them if it passed, and it did pass. So,
Remember the name of the oil company? I'm just curious.
Do I? I don't. I'm happy to send it out to you, the story out to you guys once I get back. I can send you the link. Yeah.
I cover oil and gas. So.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah, you are. Okay. Yeah.
So like on Monday morning, what do you guys do? Like how do you start looking at your week and trying to find stories in what like might be shaping up for the week? Like what are your sort of go-tos?
You want to start?
Well, I just go to the Capitol and make the rounds of leadership and certain people I know who know what's going on. In other words, I'll go see Reid, McConnell, Pelosi, Boehner, just talk to them. But you don't start ice cold on Monday morning either. I mean, generally the way Congress works, as you know, is that they're out of there Thursday afternoon. So really your week, the next week begins Friday, especially with us, because anything, people who still want stuff for Sunday papers, growing rare, want it by Thursday night. So really Friday is the beginning of our week. Anyway, you make the rounds, you get a sense of what's going on. It's an inexact science. This is where, they always say there are two kinds of reporters, people reporters and document reporters. I tend to be a people reporter, and I just talk. Now, one thing you do is just be at the Capitol, because you don't know who you're going to run into. Staff, leadership, you don't know who you're going to find in the hall. You don't know who you're going to run into in the cafeteria when you're buying a cup of coffee. Just be there. You'd be amazed. And once people get to know your face, they may not know your name. I'm sure most people don't know my name, but they know I've been there forever. And they tell you things, and they gossip. You'd be surprised. So that's what you do. I know that's very vague, but I don't have any system other than make the rounds, talk to people, be there.
I also really spend a lot of time on Sundays, not watching the shows because it feels like work too much, but like, I used to, when I wasn't in politics, love Meet the Press. Like when I was living in Denver and I was covering education, I loved Meet the Press. It was so exciting. And now I see it and I'm like, oh, it's like work. Like it's just like work. But I spend a lot of time reading like the Sunday Times, and I spend some time reading like magazine pieces on Sundays, because you get kind of a, not by like minute by minute updates, but you get kind of some bigger perspectives. And I sometimes try to like take it down to like where, my delegation or how this would affect Colorado. And like this morning, for example, yesterday there was a poll that came out about a bunch of sort of vulnerable, I'm sure it was a MoveOn.org poll, so I'm sure it was like a push poll, but it was a poll that came out nationally about the 5 or 6 most vulnerable House Republicans right now. And obviously, this has been very well written and treaded, that the Republican Party is in a little bit of a turmoil right now about the shutdown. There's like a contingent that is very much pro. We want to be locked down. We're not going to raise the debt ceiling until we talk to the president. And then you've seen, it's kind of been documented that there's 20 to 30 who are more like, this is dumb, let's just pass this clean CR. So this poll, polled like 6 or 7 Republican districts, or, kind of on the edge, Republican purple districts have Republican members, and asked, do you favor this or do you not favor this? And I thought it was an interesting poll, just not to write about, but just sort of in my head. And then the Washington Post this morning had a story about like an Ohio, just like an Ohio district, where they take one district and they kind of like, you take like one person and you kind of blow it out into the bigger story and the bigger narrative of what's happening in the country, and then you take it back down to this Ohio district. And it was like, went and interviewed the Chamber of Commerce in this little Ohio district, the business leaders. No, I'm sorry, it was Michigan. It was a Mash's district. Right. Yeah. And, these people are, sorry, whatever, But it kind of gave me an idea to do that here, to do that with one of my Republicans who's really, really vulnerable. After redistricting, his district became a third Democrat, a third Republican, and a third unaffiliated. He's in one of the toughest races in the country already. There's tons of outside money being spent in this district. He is not signed on to the clean CR thing. He's just kind of digging his heels in, and he's feeling a lot of heat and a lot of pressure, and I think it'd be really interesting to kind of go, and I might need some help with that. Like I might need to call someone in Denver to go out and knock on some business doors. I think it'd be more fun for me to do all of it, but I have to stay here, so. But yeah, those kinds of things, there's not like a rule to get story ideas, but I think those kinds of things, like I think taking a step back sometimes on a Sunday and Saturday and like reading some longer think places is more helpful sometimes than just like obsessing over the little bulletins in Politica, which we sort of have to do Monday through Friday.
And making Allison's absolutely right. But there's a fine line between, and I know I wrestle with this all the time, between being too immersed in this stuff and, as I was saying before, sort of divorcing your brain from what's going on here. And everybody's got their own way of doing it. Yeah, I watch the Sunday shows partly because I have to. But I get a lot of ideas just listening to panels of reporters. In other words, am I allowed to disparage? One of the things that bothers me about the Meet the Press panel, I know what everybody's going to say.
That's
Two
why I don't
liberals,
watch
two
it.
conservatives. But if you watch, say, Face the Nation, where they have reporters, and listen to Gwen Ifill and John Dickerson and that crowd, these people are thinking, and you're going to get ideas. And you don't have the shows you used to, but, you know, you get a lot of ideas from that, and I read the Washington Post cover to cover, read the op-eds, you know, it's amazing the ideas that will percolate, but not so much as you become a complete prisoner of this place. I mean, 1 o'clock in October, it's football time. I don't care if the world's exploding. Boy, good luck getting on the front page of that football team.
Our Denver?
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's what's keeping my job alive because we get like a
That's right,
million
the money,
unique
right.
visitors a month from Broncos coverage.
That's true. When UConn was riding high.
Thank God for the Broncos.
Yeah.
I can eat.
Peyton Manning.
I know, Peyton Manning is a rock star. One thing I was going to say, we're totally jumping around, so please feel free to give us, whatever, feedback, is I have found, just for goodwill purposes, that it helps once in a while, if you're covering these guys sort of day in and day out, there is that if you are paying attention to some of their dumb stuff once in a while, it helps. There's like some goodwill sown for when you have to go write a really tough story. I mean, I think the toughest part about this job in some ways is that you're sort of always treading the line of pissing them off, like on a given day, but you really need them, and they need you. And so I think that that's the hardest. Sometimes that's hard. And I've had times where, like for 4 months, one Congresswoman, she didn't really speak to me, and that was kind of a problem. And finally, I had to kind of like go a little crazy on her staff, and I was like, this is totally unprofessional. Like, I've never been unprofessional to you, and you've cut me off. And so we had to have this intervention, and we had to have this kumbaya moment, and it was like, it was all okay. But I think it's okay that if once in a while you throw them a bone, right? I mean, that's sort of like, this is like typical source reporter relationships. And last week I had to do, and this was I got a tip from John, who was like very, very helpful. I had to do a story about how our 4 Republicans were getting sort of the shit beat out of them by the New Jersey Congressional delegation, including some Republicans, because they all voted against the Hurricane Sandy bill. And now our Republicans are asking for that money to go to Colorado for our floods and our flood relief. Like the exact same Republicans are sponsoring bills to take money from that fund and take it to Colorado. So some of the New Jersey members were like, had choice words for them and their hypocrisy, and one of them called them the Hypocrisy Caucus, and they were not shy about this. And one of them is like a Republican and a good friend of one of our Republicans, and so I had to do this story about them, and they were all really mad that they were like, you're making this out of nothing. No one in Colorado knows who the New Jersey delegation is. It doesn't matter. And I was like, but don't you think there's a point in the fact that you didn't vote for this bill, and now you're going right to that pot of money and putting your hand in it and asking for it to come to Colorado? I mean, don't you think there's a point, that this is a little bit coming back to haunt you? And they were really mad about that. And I think that there's like, but I've done a lot of relationship building in those offices, and sometimes I write like a little feature story about their thing, and I think that we have enough goodwill that sometimes you can write these stories that make them all really, really mad, and it's just sort of about the good and the bad. And I think it's like, if you're not always out to get them every single time, I think that helps sort of. So and I'm not doing stuff that I don't think is newsworthy. I'm just doing, sometimes you just invest in a 20-minute blog post on something there.
I think that's right.
I think it's just relationship investing.
I'd be a little more cold-hearted than you. Maybe because having covered 1 million people, and you're living with them day to day, and then all of a sudden you get another job, and it's like they disappear, they vanish, and they don't need you anymore. You don't need them. I mean, you've got to remember, this is business. I mean, again, I know this is cold, but if you suddenly tomorrow go to work for the Denver Post instead of, whatever, the Providence Journal, all those Rhode Island people, you'll see them in the hall, they'll be friendly, but it just doesn't matter anymore. I mean, don't be a jerk, but I will disagree with you on one thing. I mean, I've had certain people who wouldn't talk to me. Heck, one senator hasn't talked to me in literally 30 years. Seriously. And you know what? I don't care. The hell with them. Because they can't hide at the U.S. Capitol.
No, right? It's fine. And it doesn't, you're right, it doesn't matter, but I like to sort of think that I have I can have a talking relationship with everybody that I cover.
I mean, do we miss stories because of it? Yeah, we do. And luckily, most editors understand. You know, they're going to zap you. But here's another thing. Again, this is business. I mean, when I was with
No,
Hartford.
it's not personal.
Right. When I was with Hartford, and Joe Lightman was running first for vice president, then for president. And, you know, we were his best friends, right? Oh, he loved us, blah, 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 until he started running, and all of a sudden he's giving the best stories to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and CBS. What the heck is this? You know, what happened to us? And it's cold, but you've got to have that coldness. And it goes back to what I was saying before. These are not your buddies, okay? You work there as a reporter, not as part of the institution. That's so crucial. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. This kind of is the follow-up. I just wanted to ask both of you. You said you kind of need them in some sense. What if none of them talk to you for 6 months? Would that make your job impossible?
No, God, not at all. Maybe I'd go home earlier.
That would be bad
Yeah,
for
that was
me.
obvious.
I don't know. I think we have different
Yeah.
jobs because he covers multiple states. For me, that would be very bad. That would be bad. If none of them talked to me at all, I would kind of worry there was a problem. I think because I think like, you know, I mean, because they're big boys and they know I have one woman, so they're 8 boys and 1 woman, and they're all big people and they know the job. So, I think it's okay if they're pissed off once in a while for a while, but I think if they were just like totally not talking to me, none of them, yeah, I would be a little worried.
See, I wouldn't. If they all got together and said, we're not going to talk to this guy. Again, you can't hide at the Capitol. There's hearings. They got to come out of the
Oh
door.
no, they run from you. Actually, one of my
Let 'em
members
run,
last
I'll
week
write it.
was like, I did write that, but
Well, so that's-
he started running.
Just like in Dallas, there was a time when nobody at City Hall was talking, and it didn't matter. I mean,
Right.
there's so many other people to get the story.
Exactly.
And I'm just wondering if there, in your view, is somehow or another a monopoly on, would they have some monopoly on information that if you can't talk to them, you can't?
No, I don't think so. I just like getting their quotes directly. I don't like it going through a FLAC.
But
So
again,
if none of them were speaking to me, always have to go through the PR office, and that would bum me out.
And I would say in every story, so-and-so refused to talk to me.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, the heck
but-
with them. I'll figure out a way around them. And in some ways, it almost empowers you. It really does, because you don't have to worry about the blog post you were talking about.
No, you
The
don't.
heck with it.
At that point, you have nothing to lose.
Yeah, I mean, that, you know, now the trick, now there is a line you don't want to cross where it becomes a mano thing, you know, where they're the sworn enemy, that kind,
Well,
you have
they
to keep it professional.
They have reason not to talk to you because they don't trust you or something. That seems like a different thing. But if
Well-
they just don't like what you write.
Oh, well, I guess that's true. I mean, I would think that most of the people in Congress are mature enough. I don't know, maybe they don't know. I don't know.
Here's the problem.
My bosses would be probably pretty upset with me if none of them were talking. If they were all like refused to talk to the Denver Post, I think I would probably be in trouble. I just know my bosses, and maybe I work for a different organization than you guys do, and your organizations would be like, good for you, go for it. But I think if they were all sort of like not speaking to me, I might get in trouble.
Here's the thing to remember, particularly about Congress, and to some degree city halls, but take Congress. These people live in a bubble that is unlike anything we can imagine, okay? In other words, chances are they get picked up by their taxpayer-funded driver, right? They drive to their parking space in the garage of the Russell Building or the Rayburn Building. The only people they see all day are people who either love them or want something. They never hear a negative word, okay? They don't have to stand in line at the ATM or the cafeteria, worry about traffic, park. They are in this complete unreal world. The only people they meet who say things they don't want to hear are us, okay? And so they can shut us down very easily. And you know what? If we don't want to do their bill introduction, and I'm sure you've had this, their press secretary goes to Hartford or Denver
Yeah,
and shops it
happens
to
all the time.
some 22-year-old reporter in the suburbs who's dying for a byline. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why you got to be tough and vigilant all the time with these people. Years ago, I annoyed Lieberman many times, but he was doing a press conference at a gas station, right? And he's to show high energy prices and his bill, blah blah blah, you know. And I said, with all due respect, Senator, when was the last time you pumped gas? And he fumbles around, you know, oh, what does that matter? Blah, blah, blah. When was the last time you pumped gas? He couldn't answer. That became the story. That's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know if you remember, was it Bush's father with the milk?
No.
Yeah. You got to ask these people those questions, okay? I mean, they're not, this isn't England. We don't have an aristocracy here. They're our elected representatives, so.
I am. Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say.
So I'm just curious, since Congress seems to be in this perennial crisis mode now, just kind of fumble from crisis, when do you guys decide to write about what the impacts are going to be to the people back home? You know, we've had the fiscal cliff, now we have the shutdown, we have the debt ceiling looming, and it's like you get to this point where, especially with fiscal cliff coverage, we wrote about it, there wasn't a huge, you know, the world didn't shut down, and then people were like, you guys were inventing this crisis. So, you know, how do you, especially going into like the debt ceiling crisis, how do you decide how much to play up what the local impacts are going to be?
That's a really, really good question. I mean, I think because before the government shutdown, I was really being conservative, and I was kind of leading the coverage from here a little bit in our newsroom, and we had a few conference calls, and I just was like, let's not do these stories until the very last minute, because, you know, as we know, Congress sometimes like comes to agreement on this stuff like at 11:28 p.m. So I tend to be more conservative on like, let's not do the hair on fire. I think the Washington Post is a little bit more liberal.
Yeah.
They do like the hair on fire every single day. They have a different audience, but you know, last week there's stories now. The government shut down, so now there are actually stories. There are in our state, which is grappling with this massive flood, and also it's starting to snow. So there's whole towns marooned, and because of the flood, there was a National Guardsman, 120 engineers rebuilding roads who got furloughed on Tuesday. Like, the governor freaked out, was like, okay, we're going to pay you with state dollars, which turns out to be completely illegal. So there were like, I mean, there's just like days and days of stories. The Pay Our Military Act, which I told you about, our guy, I kind of like didn't write that soon enough, introduced and passed. It didn't matter. Hagel was like laying off the furloughing the civilians anyway last week, and then our guys were freaking out about that. And then that one district I told you about that has all those contractors had commissaries that had absolutely nothing on their shelves. You know, tens of thousands of people in this one district with nothing to do, and no, you know, no real guarantee of money coming in. So then the congressman who won't vote for a clean CR is freaking out about that, and like sending letters to the president and calling him a partisan hack. And I'm like, I'm not sure it's going to go anywhere for you. That's going to really work that well for you, congressman, but go for it. So there were stories, right? And I think it's kind of like finding the line between, you know, the hair on fire to the regular people. The debt ceiling is a really, really big deal. I mean, that's going to crash our markets. That's when I made dinner last night for a bunch of my girlfriends, and two of them are lobbyists, and they were like, one of them represents Azerbaijan and Kuwait, and she's like, you have no idea how scared those countries are for a debt ceiling crash. I mean, like, or debt ceiling if we don't lift the debt limits, the borrowing limits for our debt. So that's when, I mean, I think like Azerbaijan doesn't really care that the government shut down, like whatever. But she said she's like, I get that question every day. The other girl who was sitting at my dinner table represents S&P. And she's like, it's just not even, we can't even talk about it. So I think that's when things are going to get really real. And I think that, I just don't think the standoff's going to continue.
Wow, I was watching your Broncos.
I know. I can't believe I had
Yeah,
this
wait a
wealth of.
minute.
It was weird. I didn't even know these. I mean, they're friends of mine, and we talk about our love lives. We don't really talk about the S&P,
Football,
but I
right.
did. They are kind of interesting sources for 5 minutes
Yeah.
to like. Yeah.
She said it all. Seriously, that was terrific.
Allison, that anecdote just sort of like brought up a question for me. It's kind of a big small town here in Washington. You have a lot of friends who are in these different industries. Have you ever felt ethically compromised by any friendships, and how do you kind of navigate that situation?
Yeah. I haven't. I mean, I'm not. We weren't talking. I guess I'm kind of just throwing out last night as an example.
Right.
We talked about it for about 5 minutes. They wouldn't be sources.
Right.
Like, they were talking to me as friends. They know I'm a reporter. I was kind of just more personally curious, you know, like
Yeah.
if I just met someone in the train who did this, it's like, really, what does S&P think about the debt ceiling? But I, you know, to quote them, I probably couldn't. I mean, I don't actually think they're probably even authorized to speak to the press anyway. I think that they work for Podesta, and Podesta Group has a PR person, so I probably
Yeah.
wouldn't even, they might lose their jobs if they were like quoted in a Denver Post talking about the S&P.
Right.
Which obviously I would never want because they're friends of mine. So I haven't really. I don't know how people navigate that. This town is definitely a one-company town, and
Well, let me answer that a couple
Yeah.
ways before we go. I found it a bigger problem when I was working locally. Working 2 small papers and then Baltimore, partly because I was younger and single, and the people you gravitate to were people in the business. And you know that you go out after work and you go to the Calvert House or something in downtown Baltimore, and who was there, right? The politicians and the reporters. And you were looking to date people, and that was a bigger problem. But now, it just hasn't been a problem for a lot of reasons. I know there's this thinking Washington's a small town. It's not.
Mhm.
It's 3 million people. A lot of us live out in the suburbs. You know, my wife's a teacher. We just don't deal. I mean, we talk about it. And the people in my neighborhood work all different places. Just it's not a small town as you think. When you're young, it seems that way. But if you stay here a little while and start a family and all that stuff, you'd be surprised.
I just want to throw in, because I had a couple incidents recently where some story I was working on intersected with a personal friend, and I would speak to that friend for just entirely off the record, like not even like an anonymous quote, just like, you know, here's some of the spin I'm hearing, what of this sounds real, what of this isn't real, just to like give me a sense of what to even ask other people who then I spoke to on the record, who I have no personal connection with.
Not to get into psychobabble here, but I will. No, going way back when I was single, and we always used to have these, debates, the word discussion with my friends. Are you better off going out with people who are in the business or not in the business? And we were always divided about that. Some people would only go out with people in the business because who else can understand this craziness and this competitiveness and this, and who really cares about whether the bill's going to pass or not. And then there were those like me who just the opposite. I don't think I ever went out with a woman in the business because, like once I'm done, I'm done. Talk about real life to me. Talk about your courtroom experience or your teaching experience. I just, and a lot of people I know are like that. That's their.
I've had both experiences. So.
Yeah. All that, which is best.
And I'm still single, so whatever is works. It's not working.
Whatever works, right.
It was not work. It's not working
Right.
so far.
No,
So.
I love the reality check.
The approach.
I loved it for 30. You come home. Oh my God, that Harry Reid. Oh no. Yeah, well, you should handle 25 fifth graders and see what that.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, as people who have worked in the business a long time, I think a lot of people who are new are afraid to kind of put things in their story they know to be true, like analysis that doesn't kind of bridge the gap between, your own opinion, but it's fact as a reporter. Kind of how do you draw that line? How do you know when it's okay to, write something that's fact that people kind of think might not be?
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
This won't help you, but I was probably not until I was in my late 30s that I really got comfortable because I can remember when it happened. It was during a vice presidential debate. I was supposed to be writing the analysis, and it was clear when it happened that one person won.
Can you guys in the back here?
Oh, I'm sorry.
They can't hear.
I'm sorry. I was saying there's no magic formula, but I was in my late 30s by the time I got comfortable with it. And I covered Annapolis 6 years, and I'd been here about 4 or 5 by that time. And so, I was obviously well schooled, but I just stuck to the facts, and then it just killed me to cross that line. And luckily, I had good editors who held my hand. And now, it's just the opposite. Everything I write is
Right.
analytical. But it's just a comfort level, and everybody's different. And I know when you're young, you're hesitant because you think, oh God, what if I sound like an idiot? I haven't been here. No, it has nothing to do with age or even experience. It's a comfort level.
I think if you really, really know your subject, it will come naturally. I feel like I covered 4 election cycles in Colorado. I know that state. I worked for 5 papers there. I grew up on the western side. I'm 5th generation. I know that state. I know the people. I know the voter breakdown. I covered schools in an urban district. I speak Spanish. I know the Latino voters. I know what the Eastern Plains looks like. My uncle's a farmer out there. It's dark red. I know where my parents live, what that's like. I mean, So when I was covering the presidential race from the ground last year in Colorado for 9 weeks, sleeping in a friend's basement, going to the rallies and around the state, Mitt Romney, Obama, Biden, Paul Ryan, kind of going in and out all the time. They'd go from Florida, Nevada, Ohio, Colorado, Florida, Nevada, Ohio, Colorado. Sometimes they go to Michigan, then they go back, and it was like every 3 days we'd have somebody. And I was doing sort of national TV hits a lot, like CNN and MSNBC and Fox for and sometimes they went terribly and sometimes they went okay, but live TV is very hard. For those of you in TV, hats off to you. That stuff is hard and stressful because you are sitting there and you get some volley from some dude in New York and you're sitting on a cornfield in Colorado and he's like, so here in New York, we've got water in our basements because of Hurricane Sandy. How about in Colorado? And I'm like, that's the worst segue ever.
I'll tell you what the worst is.
And I had a terrible experience. So he said that, and it was on Fox and Friends, and I was like, and I'd had 5 hours of sleep. It was like a Mitt Romney rally. I'd gone until 1:30 in the morning, and I was like, well, we're not worried about water in our basements here. And I had a boyfriend at the time here watching it live, and he was like, oh, babe, that was bad. You sounded very insensitive. You're like, look how beautiful it is in Colorado. Too bad for that Hurricane Sandy stuff. Sucks for you. I mean, whatever, obviously. And then all day I had the dumb shit chills because I would walk by the TVs in our newsroom, and there would be Sandy disaster pictures, and I was like, oh, I'm so insensitive. I do care about Sandy. I feel like calling Fox and Friends back and saying I care about Sandy, I swear. Anyway, I just said, I think that I know Colorado so well that it came naturally to talk about it. When there were so many polls coming in and out of how are the Latino voters wavering? How about women in the suburbs? And it's I know these people. I've spent so much time. I've looked at the polling. I've gone and driven down there and talked to people in Home Depot, honestly, and Walmart. My aunt is a suburban woman, and she swings both ways. It's I know those people. That's a very unique experience. And so, obviously, if I go take another job somewhere and I have to cover North Carolina, I'm not going to be as comfortable. But I think it's just a comfort level. If you know something really well, and you could say this from an energy reporter, you're an energy reporter. I mean, if you know something really well, you can just write 6 sentences about it, and you're I don't need to attribute this to someone. I know that when the market crashes on this thing, then this is what always happens, and that's why you're valuable, and that's why you guys are valuable, because you have brains and you are doing this every single day, and it's like shorthand to you, and when I don't even feel like I know anything, and then I get to Christmas dinner, and my family, which is a deeply divided family politically, will start talking about something, and I just say 6 sentences, and they're like, it's interesting, I didn't know that. I'm like, that's just kind of common knowledge, but it's because they're not spending every single day thinking about all this crap.
Well, a couple points.
Can I interject for 1 second? I just want to sort of, off of this conversation, have a little bit of a discussion about false balance, because I think when you're in your position, it's much easier to avoid the he said, she said, when you know that what he said is bullshit. You can just write, as you say, write what you know,
right,
rather than the back and forth. Does that?
All the time, that's what we do. I mean, yeah, exactly.
That's what you do, but what I'm reading in a lot of places is, the Republicans say and the Democrats say, and you're wait.
Well, that's why I'm not telling everybody to leave their jobs, but no, don't be afraid to assert yourself and say this is what's really going on. If John Boehner says, I'll have a clean debt ceiling, well, point out that he says things like that every week, and then it evaporates. Don't just say it. But that's where you have to take the lead, and that goes back to what you all were saying about comfort zones. You don't become an expert in Washington in 5 minutes. I don't know how long it takes. It took me a couple of years. When I was in Baltimore, I was like you. I could have, But then you come here, and oh my God, all these people know so much. They've been here forever. Blah blah blah. Little by little, you learn and acquire the confidence to say that. But I can't say there's a magic formula or a magic moment. I got to say one thing about TV though. Forgive me I don't mean to drop names here. If you ever do hardball, okay, and you're not actually in the studio with Matthews, you're remote somewhere, so all you're doing is looking at a camera, okay, and you hear that voice, and it's all you can do not to crack up because you keep thinking Saturday Night Live, right? Seriously, if it's really difficult, then oh my God, it's Daryl Hammond, not Chris. All you hear is the voice. You don't see the person. And anyway, by
I
the way,
always knew it went badly when my mom just said, "Your sweater was nice that you wore today." She would always say something about what I was wearing.
Hey,
I was
by
like,
the way, if
it
any of
must
these
have gone
networks ask you
badly.
to be on their show, tell them to send a car. C-SPAN won't do that, but tell them to send a car for you. I know it's ridiculous, because I know...
Just say yes, because it's really valuable for you to do this. It's really good practice, and it's promoting your organization wherever you work. And I found it to be, I just found it to be good. I think it's a good experience.
Say yeah.
Say
Okay,
yes.
Remember, you're working for free for these people, and they're getting a lot of money.
It's like half hour. I mean,
whatever. Yeah.
Can I ask just to follow up on the false equivalence issue? I mean, I hear what you're saying about the analytical part, and it's, I think, essential, especially given that the market is so inundated with quick hits. And I think if people come to an organization that they trust, they want the analysis. But at the same time, most of what we've read that has been the dominant stories about the shutdown has had a pretty strong opponent of false equivalences. I mean, you know, and it's kind of hard. I mean, I just look at some of my colleagues in Dallas that write about Ted Cruz more from the political angle. It's hard to write about a leading figure in your state and say in the third sentence, but he's crazy or whatever. and I'm exaggerating a bit. But I think that there's a lot of built-in pressure to say, well, you know, to give him a say, basically.
Right.
Oh, sure, to be
well,
fair.
You know,
Yeah.
he's not negotiating. Well, actually, you know, they did negotiate. That's how it passed in the first place.
Remember the Watergate stories where they would write a story, now I'm not saying you should do this, but they would write the story and then hold it and then call John Mitchell or whoever and insert the denial, that kind of thing. I like
mean,
that.
there used to be a roadmap, and this goes way back. You know, morning news was very traditional for a long time. It wouldn't let the story jump before it had denial. You know,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's typical, but I'm just curious. Like that actually to me is a big weakness of our, as a profession, our coverage of the last month has not been able to, for readers to really understand that this isn't just one side not negotiating and the other says, you know, there's a lot of he said, she said. Anyway, how do you do you feel like you've succeeded in cutting through that? And if you have, why has everybody else been having such trouble?
Well, look, it's hard to talk in the abstract. We don't have the stories in front of us. Okay, I only know what we've done. I think we've done fine. For example, we wrote a big story about how this chaos is the new normal. Okay, this is the way government runs today. We got a lot of play out of that. Yeah, we hardly quoted anybody, frankly, but we gave examples that get used to this. You know, this is the way it is. Then we wrote a story about how Republicans are more at risk than Democrats politically, quoting polls, quoting people. We didn't say they're in danger, but they're more at risk. So, yeah, we've done a lot of that. And I'm not trying to criticize you here, but when you make that statement, sort of my next comeback, when people say that to me, have you read what Tribune's done? Have you read what McClatchy's done? Have you read New York? In other words, what's your basis for saying that? I don't want to get into a big debate with you, but
I mean, I read probably the same newspapers that most people.
Yeah.
5, 6 different sources. And I think the volume of the discussion has lost some of that nuance.
see, I would disagree. Read the major papers, the major bureaus. We could debate this all day.
Natalie, did you have a question?
Yeah, but it's kind of, I think that you should keep this topic going. Mine was about when you were talking about going on and talking on different shows. I had some questions about that, but is your question related to this?
It's related to something you said earlier, because I actually worked for one of the Sunday shows, and I was just kind of interested in sort of your criticism of it, because obviously they've been around a long time, and just kind of, you know, one of the struggles we go through every week is obviously finding balance on a roundtable, and you said that it's often, you know, pretty predictable. So I wanted to hear more of your commentary about.
Can I ask what show you work
for Meet the Press.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, I love the first half of Meet the Press for a lot of reasons. You ask tough questions, you ask the right questions. But the second half, I'm sorry. If I see those people every week, I know exactly what they're going to say. It's,
But I don't
your
think
host
regular
tries-
people do.
But
Well, I don't know. Yeah, you might be right.
Is it a question of like, would you find somebody who's maybe like a younger or somebody like you haven't seen before, kind of as credible about a certain topic? Are there younger, sort of different people that you are looking to see that might balance out the
This is just me.
I don't think David Lightman's your target audience, though. Probably,
No.
right? I
No,
mean,
well, I'm saying
probably
that-
is.
but I think what is it, 24 to 54 is
Yeah,
what that
that's
kind
true.
of.
well, no, but I'm saying like
Yeah.
he's an inside the DC. I mean, he does this every single day.
Yeah.
So the guy in California who just gets up and turns it on, who's owns a construction company, is not like going to exactly know what John Boehner's going to say. Like, why would he?
Yeah.
That's true.
No,
You
but
know.
that's something, I mean, honestly, last week that was like, that came up because we had like Marsha, Congresswoman Marsha Fudge on the round table.
Right.
And, everybody else, I mean, we had Mike Murphy's a Republican strategist, Rich Lowry, and I'm blanking on the other person, but, Rich Lowry and,
I watched it.
This just happened yesterday, but anyway, Marsha Fudge ended up being the only congresswoman, but we also needed diversity, and so the question came up, would she kind of feel the heat of just being a congressperson amidst the shutdown, and, but we also needed diversity, so that kind of came into it, and a lot of our struggles comes from just like, well, we can't have all white people on the.
Right. Well, no, here,
We can't have
I know
all
nothing about
Dems. Yeah.
TV.
So I'm just sort of curious to hear from you, just kind of. the way
Two
you-
things, again, you were talking to somebody who's nothing about how me. There are two things I want, okay? But reminding, I'm not your target audience.
No, but
I would
it's
love to see a
valuable
panel
information.
of 4 people, younger reporters, okay, who are actually there doing the reporting. I watch Meet the Press and these other shows, and I say, gee, I didn't see any of these people on the Capitol, at the Capitol doing anything.
Waiting
I
outside.
mean, they're
the
sitting there
speaker's
reading
lobby.
us, right, and then they're going on these shows. I wanna see people who are out there doing the work, and there's lots of good people like that, number
Yeah.
one. I wanna see younger people, I really do, okay? And number two, I like, it kills me to say this, I like that Face the Nation panel.
Yeah.
They're reporters.
No,
Gwen
I
Eiffel's
understand,
out there,
yeah.
Dickinson's out, I see these people around, and they're thoughtful, and.
Well, I think it's also kind of
Sorry.
a structuring thing, and also with
Yeah.
Stevenski, who was the last round.
Yeah.
From Sunday. But yeah, I mean, but a lot of it is just kind of musical chairs because, different people kind of come on that were on Face the Nation one week and then they kind of make the rounds on all the other shows. So.
Yeah, but
it's definitely a struggle that we
I'm
have
telling you, I've been
because-
there. Some of those people I never have seen or the White House for
Yeah.
that matter. I see them at the White House Christmas party.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's about it.
No,
So-
but I mean, it's just interesting to kind of hear
Yeah,
it's no harm, no foul. It's just more out of curiosity.
So you'll have Allison on next week?
Exactly.
You should.
Yeah,
You should.
So my question was back when you were talking about going on and your mom in the sweater.
Oh. My poor mom.
I haven't been on cable news to be interviewed yet, but they asked me to go on hardball when the Boston Marathon bombings were going on because I was churning out not because I was in Boston, but I was in charge of compiling all of our feeds for the bios of the 2 brothers.
Oh wow.
And they just wanted someone to come on and mix them what we knew. And my editors were like, first off, if you're gonna go, you need to learn to pronounce these Russian names. And you
That's a good
also
point.
need to realize that he's gonna ask you some tough questions and that you're probably going to need to say, my job isn't to offer an opinion, it's to give you the facts. But they were saying, maybe you can go and do it if you want, but we're not gonna be upset if you'd rather go on someone else's show first. So my question for you is, do you have any insight for anyone that you've gone on that you really kind of felt like for someone that's just starting out going on to these shows, you should probably avoid? Because I don't know if they're necessarily right about that, and I do think that saying Tamerlan, Tsarnaev, or Blanken Schmau, I don't think that I could have really swung that after no sleep that night, but
That's a more complicated story than
I was going to go on, but then they found him in a boat. And then they wanted to talk to the guy that found him in the boat instead, which understandably.
I mean, that's a definitely more complicated story than is Mitt Romney going to win over suburban women in Denver? I can answer that question in my sleep, But I don't know. I just think it's always a good experience. You have to be careful. You can't say. But I don't know anyone who's was really bad. I mean, I did a lot of them, and I didn't have. I mean, I had a bad experience because I was an idiot, not because. And that one guy tossed me the worst volley ever. But that was just because. whatever. I don't even know why, but he just did. But I wouldn't say like he was like a bad. I would like avoid him for the future. You know, it was just
Right.
kind of like one of those weird TV moments where, when he was saying it, he was talking about Hurricane Sandy, and I'm like, where is he going with this? I didn't even pay attention to Hurricane Sandy, like, because I was in Denver and I just didn't. But I don't know. Do you have any bad, like, do any of you
Oh,
guys know
there's
any like
some-
bad TV people who would you like avoid? I mean, I don't.
Yeah, I'm not gonna
I
name
don't-
Or at
them,
least
but yeah.
you wait until
That's what
you
she's
learn how to
asking.
do it.
She's asking. You
Oh,
have
no,
to name
I
them.
don't mean like who'd never to go on, but for like the dig that my editor was writing, probably like maybe Chris Matthews is your first experience on this enormous.
Well, you have the right idea. Don't give your opinion. Stick to what you've written and leave it at that. I had a guy once in New Haven, TV station there, and when Senator Dodd, Chris Dodd was single, he had a reputation as running around with Ted Kennedy and Playboy and all this. So this guy starts in on me. He starts asking me about, what do you know about Chris Dodd's love life? And I said, well, that's not what I'm here to discuss. And this guy just won't leave me alone. And then he starts doing like a mock Bill Clinton imitation.
Whoa.
Yeah, and he starts pretending Clinton to be, chasing a woman or something. I just said, this conversation's over, goodbye. Don't even play with these idiots. And that's happened to me actually more than once. Just stick to, now they may never.
Radio.
Would you just say to them,
Yeah.
one of the reporters on my team, Yamiche Allison, she was a big reporter in the Trayvon Martin Sanford case, and they had her on MSNBC all the time. She said that, like, at least a few times a day or a week, they would try to get her to push her opinion, and she kept saying, like, listen, they pay me to be, like, just a straight reporter. Like, I'm not gonna give you my opinion to, like, lose my job. And she just said it to them a couple times. Is that, like, how you'd combat it?
Absolutely. In
Yeah.
fact, look, I'm sure I lost a million TV gigs because I wouldn't go for it, especially in the Liebman era. Because like you, I was getting called, by everybody and going to these shows, and I just wouldn't cross that line. I just wouldn't, and they would find other people who would. So, but no.
It's okay to get out there.
Oh God, yeah. Just
All right,
don't.
good.
No. Unless you
Be
want to
yourself.
be the next Bill O'Reilly or Rachel Maddow, and then go for it.
They're making more money than we are.
They sure are.
There's
Better
that.
hours too.
Dave, do you have a question?
What are some of the ways you found work best in terms of with sources getting through the spin and through their talking points to actually get them to say something of substance?
All right, number one, remember you can have direct access to these people. And I don't know if the previous panel went into this, but there's certain times that they go into this.
Yeah.
Tuesday luncheons, votes, et cetera, et cetera. Think ahead. The Tuesday luncheons are great, and very often you'll grab enough people, ask enough questions, get you through the week. Okay, I mean really. But be careful. And unfortunately, what's happened in this day and age is that it used to be you could talk to somebody. If I went up to Senator Durbin and asked him about, brownfields in New England or something, fine. Nowadays, you have a lot of reporters shopping for stories down there, and I won't name the publications. I'm trying not to make eye contact here. But, and they see you and they'll converge on it. In other words, you stick the mics. They don't even know what you're asking. They have no idea. I've gotten into more battles with reporters. I'm telling you, up until 10 years ago, this was never a problem. But now it is. So be real careful. If you have something exclusive, or just politely say, this is a private conversation, but understand that this is what's going to happen. It can get really ugly, and I can tell you stories, but I won't. All right, so number one, direct access. Number two, let's see if you agree with this. I've learned a lot from watching how politicians deal with people. I really have. Not that, back in the 80s, okay, and Gary Hart ran for president against Mondale, and he stumbled and fumbled, and he came back to the Senate afterwards, and nobody liked Gary Hart, okay? And so nobody supported his presidential candidacy. He was alone, and they resented the fact that he went against the favorite, Mondale. And people said, that's why you shouldn't make enemies. That's why you should get people to like you. And then 4 years later, Michael Dukakis runs. Nobody liked Michael Dukakis. He was a cold figure. And if he had just been more likable, I don't think he would have won. But Dodd and Kennedy at the time would say, they kept saying to people like me, they have to learn to disagree without being disagreeable. Don't make enemies. Don't get and all those little things. And watching the way they dealt with people, the patience they had, you really can learn a lot. Watching how politicians operate, the good ones and bad. I mean, look at the people who will talk to you and just converse with you, and look at the people who won't. You know, you want to be one of those talkers who can talk without worrying about getting it tweeted every 10 seconds and all that. You learn a lot that way. Oh.
Yeah, no. I mean,
What else?
that helps.
We have like 1 minute left. Did you talk about lobbyists?
Oh no, I'm happy to talk about lobbyists really quick.
Yeah.
So
I had noticed it.
you should definitely look up. Every state and every city usually spends money on lobbying, like they have, and you can look it up. They'll spend, like the city of Denver, I think budgeted $300,000 last year, and they've got a firm here, and they've got one guy, and Aurora has one. The state of Colorado has one. These people are really valuable. They're good story. They've got good story ideas. Like, I went out to lunch with one of this like random. So I was looking through lobbying disclosures, and this really random county in Colorado, like super rural, like had this lobbyist. I was like, what in the world is this county, like Bent County, have a lobbyist here for? So I call, and it turns out they're trying to keep this prison open that was scheduled to shut down. And they're trying to repurpose it because the governor was shutting it down. It was actually a state prison, but they hired someone here to find some VA use or something, and it was a page-one story. It was really interesting. This little tiny county cobbles together $40,000 for a retainer on K Street to find a prison. So those are good stories, and they're I think lobbyists are usually helpful. They are sometimes they don't go on the record. Sometimes they just give you story ideas, and you just have to go have a drink or a lunch with them. A lot of them fly back and forth from states to DC, and higher education lobbying.
Where do you find those disclosures?
Well, you can, I mean, you can go to the raw source if you want,
Right.
which is in the Senate, or you can go to Open Secrets, which has,
Room 232, Hart Building.
yeah, it's in the Senate.
The Senate,
You
yeah.
can go over.
They're also all online.
Secrets,
You can look at them online.
Allison might have talked about that.
Yeah, Open Secrets also, you can do searches on, like, you could just do a city. You could just look at Dallas. You could do a search on Dallas, and then everything that had the word Dallas in it, would probably
Yeah.
pop up. And that's a good way just to start. I usually always end up going to the Hart Building and looking at once I find it online first. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to go look at the actual original document, and then I'll go do the real sort of shoe leather reporting. But sometimes it's good to just do a web search and see how many things pop up that you think is sort of might be
Do
interesting.
you find that there's things that are revealed in the original documents that you don't see about it online? Or are you just checking?
I think I'm just checking it. It's kind of more of like an anal retentive, like I just want to make sure I see it in person. Higher education too is really interesting. I mean, I've done a few stories. They've got lots of money in lobbying, and at the same time, a lot of these public universities are like spiking their tuition rates. They're also spending more and more money on lobbying, and so I find that story to be sometimes a little outrageous, because, like, actually, there was a story that I did last year that was about CU's number one lobbyist was making $350,000 a year on the CU payroll, also registered as a state lobbyist in Colorado, and had other private clients. So she was making as a vice president $350,000 a year. She was getting state public employee pension benefits, and then she also had her own firm and her own, like, she was a total double dipper.
This is where you need your
Ridiculous.
editors to give you time. We talked about bill introductions before, and that's number one. Number two, the money. Look at the campaign contributions, make the connections there. But the third story, and you alluded to a little of this, what are these people doing?
What are they
Why
doing?
are they spending all this money? What do they do all day?
What do they do all day?
Yeah, I mean, do they make phone calls? Now, we did a little of that back in Hartford. It's fascinating how they were literally, one guy I remember walked us through as a defense guy, and how he would, like constantly put pressure on this defense staffer to get some paragraph into a appropriations bill that would provide more money for space suits in Danbury, Connecticut. But that's what this guy did. Now, then you have to ask the question, well, why in the world are these companies spending so much money on this? It's not just to have somebody sit around the Palm buying drinks for people, right? There's money here. I mean, I know follow the money is the oldest cliche in the world, and it's time consuming, it's frustrating, it might take you months to get the story, but boy, what stories
And I think municipalities are interesting too because they're public. These are taxpayer funded lobbyists, right? Which I mean, I'm always under the impression that if you're Lockheed Martin, you can spend whatever you want on lobbying, whatever. You know, it's a private company, that's what they're going to do. But when you're the University of Colorado or you're the city of Aurora and it's just like taxpayer money, I think that begs the question of what are these people doing? What are they getting for the city?
It's funny you mentioned University of Colorado. When I was in Hartford, UConn, same thing. University of Connecticut spent zillions of dollars.
I know.
And we did those stories, and they would get zillions back, and it was unbelievable.
I know. I think
I'll
it's
bet
outrageous.
you every one of you would find a regional story there about higher education.
I like that guy. He's a good source of mine, the CU lobbyist, but like, it's a racket.
It is a racket.
And if I had as a parent paying tuition, I'd just be like really, really annoyed.
We actually did a great story in Miami about lobbyists who've been hired by various cities to represent those cities here at the Capitol, and it turned out they were totally double dipping. Literally charging 5 cities for the same 1-hour lunch with a congressman.
Oh yeah, that's
Just
really
charging
good.
everybody. It was great. We had phone records from the Capitol, you know, where they were at various times, and we had the bills. We got the bills through public records.
That's fascinating.
I'd have to go back and ask. Don't remember. That's great.
It's a really good
Okay,
story.
so this has been great. Thank you guys very much. Allison.